What's up, everybody? Today on MCUX, we're going to be talking about the viral marketing campaign for Civil War. Robert Downey Jr. says he might be open to Iron Man 4. And our main story, Inhumans no longer has a release date. All that and more coming up on episode 12 of MCUX. How's it going, everybody? So as you might have noticed, we have a new format, a new location, and a little bit of a change of the way we do things here on MCUX. So it's going to be a little bit more casual as we're sitting on a couch. We're comfy. We're going to be a little bit more laid back.
Doug's not wearing shoes.
I'm not wearing shoes right now. I don't know if you can see that.
I am wearing shoes.
So yeah, but it's going to be basically the same thing. We're still going to be talking about all the news this week. All of our, major thoughts about what's going on in the MCU. So, Addie, what do we got going on first?
So, our first news story of the day is the WHIH viral marketing campaign for Civil War. Doug, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, so back in July when Ant-Man came out, right before they did that interview thing with Scott Lang, and the WHIH Twitter account and YouTube account launched, and I was really excited about it. I thought it was going to be like this awesome world-building thing where every few weeks or so, WHIH would put out a video, and it was just like nothing.
Yeah.
It was like one or two videos for Ant-Man, and then nothing for like 6 months. And now they're doing it again with Civil War. The videos they've put out are kind of cool, I guess. I'm disappointed in it, though. I think it's a great idea for a marketing campaign, but the actual execution of it has just been really disappointing.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it doesn't... the writing of those videos is not very good.
And even their, relationship is kind of weird.
Well,
he's, all for Avengers, and or all for Avengers not being under, the government, and, it's just a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
And I feel kind of weird watching it. I feel like it's something I shouldn't be watching.
Right. Right, if the idea is to make it look like a real newscast, they have failed spectacularly.
It feels like it was, a fan-made thing that Marvel was like, oh... That's a great idea. You guys keep doing that. We're just going to make it official.
Right, yeah.
That's it feels like if, the MCU Exchange was like, guys, let's do a fake news thing, and we did, and then Marvel was like, you know what? Keep doing that. Just throw our logo in.
Yeah, the only thing that makes it look official is the fact that Christine Everhart is in it.
Right, and Al Madrigal.
And Al Madrigal.
But we've seen her before.
But we've seen Christine Everhart before in the
But,
Iron Man
those
movies.
are actual, name people.
Right,
They're they're not us. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but, we've seen Civil War, and the issue of... should the Avengers be responsible? Should they have oversight? The movie does such a good job of making it nuanced and interesting. Yeah. And this campaign, the viral marketing campaign, absolutely doesn't.
Yeah.
So, great idea, but total failure
the
in terms of...
execution,
And plus, I kind of hope that it's not just going to suddenly end once Civil War comes out in America.
Right.
I feel like it will.
Yeah,
it's
don't
just
get your
gonna
hopes
be
up, because if Ant-Man is anything to go on, it will be.
Yeah.
We won't hear anything until, Doctor Strange.
It'll be 3 weeks before that.
Yeah.
Hey, there's some dude in a car crash.
Yeah. All right, what's next?
So, our next news story is Nathan Fillion Easter egg in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Jeremy, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I don't know if you guys saw the set photos, the teasers for what this was. Teasers is the wrong word. The leaks for what this was. But it looks like Nathan Fillion is playing in this Easter egg, basically, is what we'll call it. Simon Williams, a.k.a. Wonder Man, who's an actor. And what we see in the photos is a marquee on a poster with his face, and there's a couple of them.
There are a couple movie posters, yeah.
Yeah, which is super cool, because for Guardians of the Galaxy, that means, or Volume 2, that means they're going to Earth. And if you look at the photos, there's a Tony Stark biopic on it as well, which shows that they're going to Earth, not in a flashback like they did in the first movie, but in present day, where Tony Stark is Iron Man, and
And he's so famous that he would have a biopic.
Right. Who would play?
Oh my god.
I feel like even if this was before Iron Man, it's not totally unreasonable.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Because the beginning of Iron Man, when he's winning that award.
Right, he's already famous for being Tony Stark, but the fact that he's played by Nathan Fillion, an older guy, means that this is present day, which means we're going to Earth.
Which is super exciting. And I don't know how long, I don't know why, but
Another video from the set showed a bunch of, in the same town, like a bunch of cars getting flipped. So there looks like there's an action set piece on Earth.
I'm so excited. I also love Nathan Fillion.
Yeah.
So, like, the first thing I ever saw him in was
Dr. Horrible.
I almost said Doctor Strange.
Nope.
Dr. Horrible, and I just fell in love with him, and I love how he was in the first one.
I obviously know him from Firefly.
Right, Firefly.
That's where most people know him, probably.
Yeah.
Well, now Castle, which he is great in. The rest of the show, stopped watching a long time ago, and we'll leave it at that.
But yeah, I mean, he had a small cameo in Guardians 1, so it makes sense.
But not like a recognize. He was like, that was like I'm friends with James Gunn, let me be in this.
I think that's all this is going to be, too. I think it's just going to be the posters in the background, and that's about it.
Right.
We just see his face this time.
Yeah.
So, our next news story is the Ancient One casting controversy. Doug, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
I wish I didn't have to.
Yeah.
I hate this story because there's just no winning proposition. There's no winning position to take on this. But so basically what happened is that the Ancient One, traditionally a Tibetan man in the comics, created in the 60s, so kind of a racist caricature of an Asian man. So when they cast Tilda Swinton, there was a lot of controversy about whitewashing the character. Which, okay, I understand the argument. So a couple people have come out and made comments about this, one of whom, Tilda Swinton herself, basically came out and said, they didn't come to me and ask me to play an Asian character.
Which
is good, yeah. It's a complete reimagining of the character. It's not an Asian character being played by a white woman.
Yeah.
It's a reimagining of a character who happened to be Asian in the comics. Okay. Alright, that's fair enough. And then the writer of Doctor Strange, Robert Cargill, he was on the Double Toasted podcast, which, by the way, if you guys don't listen to, it's an awesome, really fun podcast. And he made some comments that I think the sentiment behind them was good. The wording was not.
Yes.
He basically said that with the Ancient One, it's basically a no-win proposition for Marvel, because there are political tensions in Asia. If they had acknowledged that Tibet was a place, that could piss off 1 billion people in China, the largest international market ever. You don't want to risk your movie not getting played in China just because you decided to make a character Tibetan. So for political reasons, you can't make them from Tibet. So then what's the next solution? You just make him generic Asian. Then you're falling into the stereotype of you're having the wise old Asian, mystic martial arts master. That gets dicey, because remember, this character was created in the 60s, not the most racially enlightened time.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to whitewash the character, so don't cast a white man. And so the solution was to kind of reimagine the Ancient One as this title that gets passed down. It's not tied to any specific person or race or gender. And this version happens to be Tilda Swinton. But the way Cargill said it was, he knew that no matter what they did, they'd piss off social justice warriors.
End quote.
And he did. It was like, watching the podcast, it was like he was doing a really good job saying it until he got to that point. Yeah. And it was just like...
I think Cargill's comments are a really good... it's a good summary of how dicey this situation is. And how no matter what they did, somebody would be upset. It's a little bit like when Iron Fist was cast.
Right.
We talked about how no matter what you do, somebody's going to not like the decision.
Right. And I think the thing to focus on, again, and I think this was kind of what we did with Iron Fist too, is Tilda Swinton's been cast.
Right.
There's no
it's been shot. The movie has
Production's
wrapped
over.
Production.
Right.
And we've seen her in the trailers, and say what you want about the casting, we can all have our own feelings about that, but what should be focused on, at least for this show and what we do, is I'm super excited for Tilda Swinton.
Yeah, she's so good.
No matter how you feel about whether or not she should have been cast in the first place.
That's a different conversation that should be had, but not by us.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, she is cast, and Tilda Swinton's a great actress, so we should be excited.
Yeah.
And she just looks so good in the trailer.
Yeah.
But so the kind of third comment came from a representative from Marvel, which I thought was interesting because they haven't really made an official statement about any of these other controversies. But after you use the term social justice warrior, unironically, you kind of have to make an official statement. And the statement was, a kind of lawyery, saying nothing type statement.
Right.
Basically saying Marvel has a history of casting diverse characters. This version of the Ancient One happens to be Celtic. It's not an Asian character. It's not whitewashing, and Tilda Swinton's talented.
Yeah.
Okay, it's one of those things where I don't want to judge it too harshly till I've seen the movie.
Right.
I really do see both sides of this argument.
Right.
I think that there really was a missed opportunity here to maybe cast a character who wasn't just a white person.
Yeah.
On the other hand, this movie does have Wong, who is being played by Benedict Wong, who is great, and I'm excited for him.
So many
And
names.
Baron Mordo, a traditionally
Yeah.
Eastern European character, is being played by Chiwetel Ejiofor,
Who is going to be amazing.
who's going to be great, but that's another controversy where, is it only okay to cast villains or minorities in villainous roles? But Mordo doesn't even look like he'll be a villain.
Right.
Like, there are many, many layers to this conversation that I think a lot of people on both sides, whether you're completely for or against Tilda Swinton, I think a lot of people are only seeing their own side of the argument. And I think understanding that this is a really complex issue with no easy answer.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to keep in mind during
and
things
I think
like this.
the one last thing I'll say to this is that Marvel, as they're run, are a business.
That's true.
And back to that thing about what he said about the Chinese market and Tibet. The Chinese
really
market
important.
is huge.
Yes.
It's the second biggest market.
it's
Worldwide, it
It's
goes
America,
US, China,
China.
and China's expected to overtake US sometime in the
Yeah,
next 10
and
years.
especially with how much funding they're putting into every single project Hollywood's doing now.
Yeah,
It's something. It's put it this way, you just can't ignore it.
You can't ignore it, yeah. And a lot of people might say, oh, it's cowardly for Marvel to kowtow to Chinese political issues just because they want to make money. But no, like you said, it's a business. It's the film business.
Yes,
Yeah.
they
So-
are part of Hollywood, and Hollywood makes money,
Yeah.
and we know that's what Hollywood does.
Okay, so jump down into the YouTube comments and tell us
Yeah.
how we're all wrong on either side of the issue, because I'm sure we've said something that'll piss you off
Yeah.
no matter
Yeah.
where you stand on this. But that's good. I mean, this is
It's
something
a
that
conversation that should be being had.
it needs to be talked about. It's just, no matter what you say, there's no easy answer to this.
Right.
That being said, what's next?
So the next news story is that Robert Downey Jr. is open to do an Iron Man 4. And I find this kind of interesting because just like a few months ago, he was saying that it probably won't happen.
Yeah.
But now he's coming out saying that he would want it to happen. I think after finishing Civil War and like doing all the press tour, I think it made him open to the idea again.
Yeah.
Because of how
Yeah.
fun, and I think he loves it, and there also might be a business side to it that maybe he
He's
would
gonna
get
get
paid a lot more money or like the same amount. So that's my idea about it. I would like to think in my little happy heart that it's a lot of just like, I want to be with my friends and like act with them more.
I mean,
but
that sounds naive, but I actually think there might be an
No,
aspect of that.
I totally.
If you
totally
look
because
agree.
it's a
at-
huge part of his life now.
It's
that,
it's also what got him out of
At
his.
Well, partially, for sure,
partially,
yeah. I mean, it really put him back on track, and
Yeah.
now he's one of the biggest names on the
Is
planet.
the-
Yeah.
And with movies like The Judge performing how they did,
Yep.
Tony Stark really is his most bankable role.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this isn't, like you said, Addie, not ultimately too surprising because he just signed on for Homecoming as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's open to the idea that, do you think we'll see an Iron Man 4?
I think with him saying he's open to it, yes. I think if he said I don't want to do it, Marvel would be like, okay, you've given us so much anyways, let's save you for the Avengers.
Right.
I think if they can get him for another one, again, back to the Hollywood as a business, they can release an Iron Man 4, make another $1 billion because they'll incorporate Spidey in.
Yeah.
And that'll be on Marvel's side, not Sony.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
Marvel will jump at that chance.
I think, but the other issue is as well that we will talk about later. The movie slate for the next few years is so jam packed.
Yeah, Iron Man
about
4
it now,
could not happen before
Till,
I
2020.
just I don't know where they would like just like doop, and
I
then
don't
like
think
we
they-
don't
They
know.
won it in Phase 3.
Yeah, and like we don't know what the outcome of Infinity Wars is going to be for Tony
Right,
Stark.
that's
So
true.
it's like, is there going to be
Yeah.
space? I don't know.
Good point.
Yeah.
I think there will be space. But will there be space?
Moving
Sorry.
on.
So our last news story of the day is that Nick Fury will not be in Thor Ragnarok. Jeremy, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, well, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when it
Like
was
a month or two ago, yeah.
when there was the rumor that he would be in Thor Ragnarok, and we talked about like Nick Fury in space, which was like kind of a funny concept,
right?
Why?
We all found it,
but
was
it was
really
all like
weird.
yeah, it was all like this is a strange thing because I get Hulk and I get Thor going to Asgard, going and dealing with Ragnarok and doing that, and having Nick Fury there is just weird.
He's a character that doesn't make sense
It's
in
just
the movie.
why?
Right. And also
Where?
because we don't know where he is, we don't know what he's doing. Mm-hmm. It'd be weird if he just kind of showed up in Thor Ragnarok and was like, "Oh yeah, remember me? I'm Nick Fury. I haven't been in charge of anything in a couple years."
Right.
Like, but now I'm going to Asgard as a human. It'd be strange.
It kind of matches like Age of Ultron that he just like pops out.
Yeah.
So like it was like on that like in that area, I'm like Nick Fury's kind of like this mystical guy that just pops out.
That would
of
be kind of funny,
but in space.
Right? Instead of him like showing up in Clint's barn, he shows up in like the Asgard throne room,
just like sitting there like drinking with Odin and like
Odin's serving him.
Odin's like, "Oh, Nick, what can I get you?" And he's like, "A new eye." Yeah, no, it's just that was a strange thing all around, and it makes a lot of sense that they were like, you know what? Nah.
Yeah, but interestingly, and this isn't really a surprise, while Feige said he's not going to be in Ragnarok, he did say we're going to see Fury again soon, which, makes sense. What movie do you think we'll see him in next?
Doctor Strange.
Really?
Well, because Black Panther is already connected to everyone.
Right.
And Doctor Strange isn't, from what we know.
Fair.
No one has even brought him up yet. Mm-hmm. So I think he would be the next one.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. It's also really soon, too. So
it feels like maybe in the post-credit scene of Doctor Strange.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. He's not going to be...
It feels a little weird to have him show up there.
No, he's going to come in with a folder that says Avengers Initiative and, like, put it on the desk.
I think
we
might see him in Homecoming.
No. Oh, that's a good point.
Oh, that'd be so...
Right.
That's a good
Peter's
point.
just like,
Peter's like, who are you all? Yeah. Great, let's move on.
Let's move on.
Great. So, on Tuesday, the 18th episode of this season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. aired, titled The Singularity. For an in-depth discussion of this episode, be sure to tune in to our sister podcast, itsallconnected.com, or It's All Connected on MCUexchange.com. But for now, let's talk about our initial impressions of this week's episode. I was just worried about Fitz and Simmons this whole time. They're all getting, like, actually lovey-dovey, and I'm just like, don't do anything stupid. Don't get hurt. That's really all I cared about this episode.
Yeah. This episode to me got to the point where I was like, I've been super excited about the back half of this season since it started. And the episodes, they've been great. And this one, I don't think was bad. I just got to that point, and maybe that's because, like, there's a lot of other stuff I got coming up. I was just like, I have to now sit down and watch this.
And
it was like
I hear you.
It was like a little bit of a labor of love.
Well, to me, this episode suffered... Sorry, I'm pouring a drink. This episode suffered some of the same problems that Iron Man 2 did, where it's just so much setup for something that's going to be awesome.
Especially with what we're seeing for next episode, I think.
Right, with Kree showing back up on Earth and every, all this stuff.
I'm excited for that.
I am excited for it, but this just felt like, for this to work, we need to do a lot of setup, and that's what this episode felt like. All of the stuff that didn't have to do with Fitzsimmons just totally felt like setup.
Yeah. And the other thing that I didn't think about it initially during the episode, but there is a group of superpowered people. Why doesn't Coulson or someone reach out to an Avenger?
We don't need to have this conversation.
I love this conversation.
It's just like this is a literally one statement thing. We don't have to talk about it, but I didn't feel that way. But now that I really thought about it, I'm like, there are like 5 superpowered Inhumans together, and one of them can control them all.
Right.
They need
also if the Kree are landing on Earth next episode, there is an alien species.
Especially that Scarlet Witch isn't an Inhuman. Like she wouldn't.
What's that?
No, she's like
Scarlet Witch is not Inhuman.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. She's not an Inhuman.
She could go fight.
She wouldn't be controlled.
So she couldn't be controlled by Hive. I see what you're saying.
People that can fight them.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that.
That's what I just thought about. So I was like, wait, that would make so much more sense than like S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who
Jessica
have no
Jones.
superpowers.
Yeah.
But that's literally a one common thing.
But no, I see what you're saying. It's getting to the point now where the suspension of disbelief in terms of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. not connecting to the rest of it, it's starting to get tough.
I think it's worse than the Netflix series because there's multiple ones.
Because the Netflix series are self-contained.
In New York. Yeah, these guys are flying around the world, going from place to place to place to place. Yeah. And it's like, how is someone not noticed?
That's my biggest complaint.
I definitely hear you, but
it's like
it's just something that we just have to kind of accept and move on from,
and that's okay.
It's not going to change.
Yeah. But yeah, I really just worry about Fitzsimmons, and I really hope they're not one of the ones that die at the end. Which I'm kind of scared that they are, and they're like the only two characters that I really
don't want to see leave
right now.
Yeah. All right. Great. What's our main discussion of the day?
Our main discussion for the day is that the Inhumans movie was removed from the Marvel's slate. And that is kind of an issue because what we were just talking about, the Inhumans are such a huge part now of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the TV show that I feel like that the Avengers need to know about them. So I feel like that was one of the things that the Inhumans movie was going to be able to discuss. But now that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well,
so
what we know of what this movie was going to be is it wasn't going to really deal with the Inhumans we've seen. It was going to deal with the Inhumans royal family out in outer space, maybe coming to Earth and interacting with some of the other people in the MCU.
Or maybe the royal family's already on Earth.
Right, or maybe it was even going to pull a Guardians and just be its own thing. Right. But it was going to acknowledge Inhumans and the whole Kree meddling business that happened. And now we've taken that away. And maybe we've pushed it back, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just don't do an Inhumans movie now because of how much trouble they've had.
And especially that they already have Inhumans in the TV show. Yes. So if they take the movie off the movie slate, maybe they'll explore the royal family in the TV show, which would probably make a little bit more sense since Inhumans are so big.
The problem with that is, like you said, the Inhumans are this huge thing. They're planetary threats. Mm-hmm. There is no reason for them not to be on the Avengers radar. I don't really I'd like to see Black Bolt. I'd like to see the Royal Family. I'd like to see an Inhumans movie. I don't care so much about that. What I do care about is getting the concept of Inhumans introduced in the movie as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, Feige has said multiple times that the Inhumans movie is still happening. It's just... And the reason he gave, and the reasons make sense, the reasons he gave are, since they announced their Phase 3 slate, they've added Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then the big one, Spider-Man.
Which, that's one of the thoughts that I was having when they took Inhumans off that date. Maybe that's a sequel to Spider-Man.
I think that's a safe bet. Yeah. Well, maybe not that exact date, because remember that Indiana Jones 5 is coming out the next...
A couple of months within that little slot.
I agree. I think
Indy's under Disney, right? That Spider-Man would be under Sony.
True, but because it's in the MCU, I think Sony and Disney will coordinate release dates.
But just it's not like it's the same studio.
It's not the same studio, but it's in both movies' best interest for them to stay clear of each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you look at Sony's top 5 grossing movies of all time, 4 of them are Spider-Man movies. Mm-hmm. The other one is Skyfall.
Yeah. Which is James Bond, a huge franchise.
Which is James Bond, right. Sony is not in the best place financially right now, as we know from all those leaked emails, as we know from the fact that this deal is happening in the first place.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, Addie, I think that's a very good point. I don't think they're going to want to wait 3 years between Spider-Man movies. Yeah. Because, again, remember, if you don't remember the way the Spider-Man deal works, Sony is not getting $1 from Civil War. Likewise, Disney's not getting $1 from Spider-Man Homecoming. Mm-hmm. The character is going to be in both movies, and that's going to help both studios' movies do better financially. But just because Spider-Man's awesome in Civil War, that doesn't mean anything for Sony other than it's going to make Homecoming do better.
Attract viewers to Homecoming, yeah.
Tom Holland has his life set, is what I was just thinking.
I mean, he's like Daniel Radcliffe in the early 2000s. Yeah. He has his next 15 years.
And I don't think he's aware of it either.
No, I'm sure he is.
Oh, just from interviews and like how he talks about everything, it's still like kind of so...
No, I'm sure he's
and it's like a slow, like, oh God,
this is
what I'm doing.
This is my life now. Yeah.
But going back to the Inhumans getting pushed to a non-existent date right now,
Right.
It's now just hanging. And so we get why it's pushed. We
get
all
why
understand.
And you know what?
Feige's reasons make a ton of sense.
I was going to say, I think a lot of times when release dates get pushed back or removed, it's because the studio no longer believes in the property. I don't think that's the case for this. I do think Feige's reasons are why
I trust Feige.
Yeah.
You know?
And like the other thing is, and my thing for this is, Phase 3 has so much in it right now.
Yeah.
They've got, there's 2 movies a year, 3 movies in 1 year?
No, it's the other way around. It's 2 movies in 2016 and then 2017, 18, 19.
All have 3. And so they have so much to deal with for casting, for production, for using their studio lots, which again, Pinewood Atlanta is booked full. Pinewood London is Pinewood London is where they shot Guardians, and I think part of Avengers, Age of Ultron. But London is now out because of the Warner Brothers, Star Wars and the Harry Potters.
Oh, that's right.
It's a lot of stuff they have to
And Thor
juggle.
Ragnarok has moved to Australia, and they don't have another up-to-speed studio lot that can handle another film in this without rushing through production on these other movies.
That's the thing with Disney is now that we're getting Pixar and Lucasfilm and Marvel all under and Disney and the live action and the animation, right?
And the remakes from the live action remakes from Jungle Book,
which is huge. And by the way, if you haven't seen Jungle Book, go see Jungle Book. It's awesome.
Support John Favreau.
Directed by John Favreau,
Scarlett Johansson, Idris Elba. There's a lot of MCU
connections
guys
there.
in that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Ben Kingsley.
And it's actually some really interesting stuff for CGI for movies in general. But that's a different
unrelated
discussion.
But no, I see what you're saying. But I think it's going to be harder and harder for Disney not to cannibalize themselves in terms of when they release things. Yeah. So I don't think this is going to be too uncommon where we, especially with at least one Star Wars movie coming out a year, that'll get bumped to 2, I think, eventually.
I don't. I really think they're going to keep
I feel like that'd be
Star
smarter.
Wars. I think they're going to keep a Star Wars in December every year.
I'm not talking about what they should do. I'm talking
about
what I think they will do. And
fair.
if they can put out $1 billion Star Wars movie twice a year, they will.
The other rumor that I heard about for
Inhumans?
the Inhumans was that since Ike Perlmutter was the one that wanted the Inhumans movie, that's why maybe it's getting pushed back because Feige didn't really want it. So since he's not part of the movie decisions anymore, they're pushing Inhumans back a little bit more.
Right. So yeah, what you're talking about, for those of you watching who don't know, is that Ike Perlmutter is the guy in charge of Marvel Comics or Marvel Entertainment. And up till just like 4 or 5 months ago, Ike Perlmutter was the guy who was ultimately in charge of every division of Marvel, including the comics, the TV shows, and the movies. So what basically happened is that Feige and Perlmutter had a lot of conflict, and the rumor is that Feige essentially threatened to quit if Alan Horn at Disney did not get him out from underneath Perlmutter.
Right.
And of course, they were not stupid enough to risk losing Feige, so they did. So now Marvel Studios, like you said, Addie, Ike Perlmutter has absolutely no control over Marvel Studios. It's all Feige, who answers directly to Alan Horn
of Disney.
At Disney Pictures, who ultimately answers to Bob Iger.
Right.
So what the rumor is, Ike is sort of this notoriously stingy, conservative guy.
And they brought him in. He was brought into Marvel in the 90s to make sure that when they were about to go bankrupt. And he is the one who sold off Fantastic Four and Spider-Man so Marvel could survive.
Yes, and to that end, he's a really brilliant businessman.
Yes.
But he's very frugal.
And shrewd.
And doesn't really need to be anymore.
And doesn't need to be anymore when you're making $1 billion or $2 billion movies.
Right.
But so apparently the rumor was that Perlmutter didn't want a movie starring a black character or a female character, and so he fought against Black Panther and Captain Marvel.
Right, and
whereas Feige wanted those, and Perlmutter wanted Inhumans. Feige didn't necessarily. So yeah, the rumor, or what you're saying about Perlmutter, that makes a lot of sense.
I don't think it's that alone, because I think the Inhumans idea he does want to use. I just don't think at that moment he wanted to use, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. And I think the reason that Feige initially gave, which is that, Spider-Man's in the MCU now, I still think we're going to get a sequel to Homecoming in that 2019 slot.
Where Inhumans was going to be.
Right, yeah. I don't think there's any chance that that's the entirety of why Inhumans got moved back.
It's probably a lot of reasons.
I think it's a lot of
There's
reasons.
also just, again, there's so much they have to handle in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to add just, again, that whole slate of new characters.
In one movie.
Yeah.
It's like a whole
and
new
again,
thing in
with
the
people
universe.
and Marvel getting a little fed up with just the origin story, if you have that, it's just another origin story.
So speaking of origin stories, and here's the biggest reasons why I'm disappointed in this news. I think if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. hadn't already been dealing with Inhumans, it would have been fine. I wouldn't have cared at all.
Yeah.
But these are, as we talked about in our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. discussion, these are huge things that are happening in the MCU that are just being ignored by the movies.
Yeah.
So I don't care when or if we get an Inhumans Royal Family movie. We need the concept of Inhumans brought into the movies.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to do that is we're going to have Kree probably in Guardians 2. I think we need a Kree to explain what the Inhumans are so that they can just start putting Inhumans in the movies in the future and not worry about confusing people who don't watch the TV show.
Right.
And I mean, like, even right now, I think I talked about this with you guys. I don't know if I said it already, but just being able to have some faces that we know already from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. of humans in the background of some headquarters in a movie. So I'm like, oh, they're aware that they exist and they're keeping tabs on them. Yeah. That's just something.
Just something like that. And
it's so simple.
And if they don't do that, if they just leave Inhumans out of the movies as this kind of orphaned property.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. gets...
One of two things happen with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Either, if they want to connect to the MCU again, they need to get away from Inhumans, which ruins everything the past season and a half has been building up.
Yep.
Or they just drift further and further away from the MCU. Right. I think both of those are tragic things to happen to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so whether we get an Inhumans movie or not, I think that the concept of Inhumans really needs to be brought into the movies as soon as possible.
Well, because the only other thing to do is, like, what do you kill off all the Inhumans? You send them to another planet? Like, what do you do with all of these super powerful beings that you have Lash go and just, like, wipe them all out, and then he's like, oh, I hate myself, and he commits suicide, right? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
This is why I'm not a writer.
Thank God none of us are in charge of the MCU.
Right.
Okay, so I guess final thoughts on this. Do you guys still think we'll see an Inhumans movie at some point?
I think it just depends on a lot of different things. It depends on what happens in Infinity Wars. Mm-hmm. It depends on what characters die. It depends on what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to be doing in the next 3 years.
Yeah. If they last that long.
Yeah, or if they all die at the end of this season. It just depends on a lot of things. I think Feige's doing the right thing where he's like, it's not pushed back, it just has no release date, but it's still there. There's still a possibility. He says it's going to happen.
Right. I think what might happen is at the end of the saga of Phase 3, one of two things happens. Either Marvel expands further into the galaxy.
Right.
And we see, oh, Thanos is here. What other beings in the universe could possibly destroy us? We have to go find them and be wary, and then we go find the royal family.
Uh-huh.
Or the opposite, which is what I think will probably happen more, is it goes back to being a little more self-contained on Earth, a little more like Ant-Man was, where it was like, here's just the story of, and there's no galactic threat.
You think that'll happen even after they meet the Guardians of the Galaxy?
I mean... It depends on who dies in Infinity Wars. Okay. It depends on how much havoc Thanos wreaks. It depends if they pull a classic comic book, reset the timeline.
Right.
It's gonna... I don't think we'll see the royal family anytime soon, but I wouldn't be surprised within 8 years that we see them. But I think it's now far in the distance.
Okay, I'll be a little bit more optimistic than you guys. I do think we'll see it. I think we'll see it near the beginning of Phase 4, and I think galactic threats and Inhumans will play a major role in Phase 4. Yeah. But maybe that's just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
We still have a couple of years to go.
Yeah, and a lot of movies.
Yeah.
A lot of movies.
So, that's the end of this week's episode of MCUX, everybody. Make sure to follow MCUExchange.com for up-to-the-minute updates on everything related to the MCU. I'm Addie Bree Hayes. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Addie Bree.
I'm Jeremy Stewart. You can follow me Twitter and Instagram at Jeremy_Stewart.
And I'm Doug Herring. Make sure to follow the MCU Exchange at the MCU Exchange on Twitter or just at MCU Exchange on Facebook. And let us know in the YouTube comments what you thought of this new format. We've got some changes coming. Some changes today, some changes in the future. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that those changes are things that you guys like and have a say in. So whether you like this format or want it to change in a different way, jump down in the comments. Yeah. Let us know what you think. Your feedback, as always, is extremely valuable to us. And if you want to ask a question that we can answer on a future episode, tweet at us or email us at mcuxshow@gmail.com. With all that being said, thank you so much for joining us, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye!